you, David. Okay, story time. The year is 2018. I'm a junior IC a year into my tech career. I just finished my second round interview with the AAA games company. It was my dream to break in, and I was finally standing a chance. I was on the cusp. Days later, Kotaku published an article exposing a culture of misogyny at this company. I recall a blur of uncertainty and questions over my life decisions. But what I did have clarity on in the ensuing days was a feeling of surprise. I noticed how unusually open and curious my hiring team was. Everybody on the hiring panel wanted to know my reactions to the article. Instead of towing the company line or silence or denying any of it as untrue, they were openly sharing their stories of what they had witnessed. They were full of trepidation and hope. So it turns out that the team captain at the time had introduced a mandatory meeting based on the idea in the book, The Culture Code. He pitched it as such. We're going to spend time practicing talking about the very thing that is making us all uncomfortable. And we're going to keep doing it until we started to feel safe enough to open up about our team's problems. And the name of that meeting was called Safety and Belonging. At various points in my career, I've witnessed this powerful ritual rebuild and recreate trust. I've watched it transform organizations. I've proposed it on every team I've been a part of since, and by the end of this talk, I hope you'll be convinced that you can do the same. So when I first introduce engineers to this concept, I begin by explaining its name. Why safety? In the past few years, psychological safety has become a real buzzword. This 2017 Harvard Business Review article defines it as the belief that you won't be punished when you make a mistake. The definition of belonging I use comes from this biceps framework, taken from Paloma Medina. They define it as a need for community, a feeling of closeness with a group, being a part of a tight-knit community. Well-being is defined as feeling cared for. The whole group feels happy and healthy. And connection means kinship or mutual understanding with another person. So these concepts, they're all great, but they're rather abstract. So I could picture you now, you're a fledgling engineering manager. You believe in all this really strongly, but you notice signs that your org does not share your enthusiasm. Or you're starting off, you're a junior IC like me, you're not feeling empowered yet to propose any new processes. So then how do you actually put these ideas into practice? So over the years, I've refined my pitch, but I break it down into a simple 3-part workshop, which I think you can adapt to your organization's context. The first goes into introductions and a trust-building exercise, which I will share the concrete details of in the next slides. You establish some norms, you explain the concept of psychological safety to your teams, and you practice vulnerability, but in a very low-stakes environment. You repeat this exercise as many times as you'd like, and then you get your team laughing, bantering with each other. Good signs. Your team is opening up. The next workshop has team members discussing feedback and how they like to give and receive it. Our next one was about burnout, which was a lagging metric in our employee survey. Assuming you also have employee health surveys, you can replace it with any topic that you like. So you might notice that these workshops are designed to allow for a natural progression of topics from lighter into heavier topics. So this allows the group to establish a baseline level of trust before they open up about deeper problems. And now switching gears a bit, I want to share some of these actual slides. So this is an example of norms I've used in past workshops. I found that these have been the ones that stood up against the test of time over many different organizational contexts. You can invite the room to co-create these norms with you, which gives people the sense of ownership. And I always begin a workshop with a review of these to help establish a baseline level of safety and predictability to these rituals. And now here's our first workshop, trust. The format of these meetings is established to be round robin in the beginning. Everybody gets their turn to speak. This format is especially powerful for teams existing in dynamics where maybe one or two voices are drowning out the rest, or maybe it's difficult to get anyone to actually talk. Folks answer questions from the list, then they optionally add a new one once they are done speaking. I've actually been told by a direct report that they love this exercise, and this is usually an engineer who is very resident to actually take on any sort of these exercises. And he says, like, this is so much better because he actually has a choice to pick the question that he wants to answer. So there's a lot more nuance than I can cover in 10 minutes, but I do want to pass on some lessons that I've picked up over the years. So I've already talked about norms, but moving on, you need to repeat this ritual many, many times. I recall a producer who approached me and asked, hey, can we just condense that, 3 workshops into one day? Let's just do it on one day. No, vulnerability takes time to build. So set up a recurring meeting and explain to people that's going to take weeks, if not months. And pick engaging topics. The more interesting, the more people are willing to open up. The whole idea is to get people talking to each other. And find the right group of people. I've seen it work from groups as small as 3 to large leadership groups of 15, though I recommend anywhere from 5 to 9 people who work closely together day to day, so you're not constantly renorming the group. You also need a very strong facilitator. And usually that is the manager or the producer, but facilitation is a skill that anyone can pick up. I linked some resources here, and I encourage managers too to see this as a development opportunity for any ICs who are wanting to kind of exercise facilitation skills. And finally, the workshop questions are formatted in a way that has participants lean on their lived experience instead of speaking in generalizations. If we want to invite vulnerability, the best way to do that is to ask people to share their stories. The point of the exercise is not to solve problems, but rather to ensure that each member of the team feels heard. I also want to caution that I did not always pitch this meeting successfully. Imagine me in a room of senior gameplay engineers, very stressed out. Leadership is under pressure to deliver, and we're asking them, hey, let's set up a recurring meeting where we're not getting any work done. And also, people have had past work trauma, and they're rightfully uncomfortable opening up. So I found that the best way to address these concerns was head-on. Talk to them about what safety and belonging is not. So it doesn't just stay at trust-building exercises. It might start off lighthearted, but we do get into heavier topics. And then when we get there, it's not endless venting or group therapy. The role of the facilitator is actually really key. Emphasize that they're there to guide the discussions when they go off rails and to prevent people from monopolizing the room. And finally, people hear safety and they confuse it with this concept of the safe space. And I like to say that this is not a room where no one's going to disagree, but our success criteria is actually a junior engineer who feels comfortable challenging a senior engineer over technical discussions. It all comes back to, we admit our problems to each other, and that way we increase our efficiency. So going back to me, in 2018, I did end up joining the games company. Now, I would actually stay for another 5.5 years. I seized upon the culture I found on my first team at Riot, and I'm proud of my role in helping it spread. The best feedback I've received is knowing that this practice spread to other teams without my interference. I saw producers and leaders across the org adapt my workshop slides and make it their own. And I never imagined when I first joined the games industry and heard of this little meeting called Safety and Belonging that my career would be propelled by being its advocate. I hope you feel inspired to make healthy teams and rituals like this widespread. Thank you.